So you're telling me that there was a Donald Trump before? Or better, I am telling you that there was a Donald Trump before. Trump for sure the president causing most emotions in a very long time. And I'm telling you, it's not the first time we have such a president. In the first half of the 19th century, there was already a man called Andrew Jackson. And interestingly, Andrew Jackson also belongs to Donald Trump's favorite American presidents. And there are actually a lot of commonalities between this man, Andrew Jackson, and Donald Trump. Therefore, we will look at the similarities and also some differences between Andrew Jackson, the 7th American president, and Donald Trump, the 45th and 47th president of the United States. Andrew Jackson was born a few years before the Revolutionary Wars in 1767 in the Waxhaws. The first big difference between Trump and Jackson would be that Andrew Jackson grew up in poverty. You probably know Donald Trump's career before becoming president as a real estate entrepreneur. Jackson, however, had a career in the military and also as a lawyer, but he indeed started to invest into real estate as well. As a lawyer, he was often paid with land. That's another difference. Trump in real estate was mainly living room, architectural whatsoever. In Jackson's case, his assets mainly refer to land owning. But just like Donald Trump, Jackson created many assets with that, buying land cheaply and selling it for more. Andrew Jackson actually, just like Donald Trump, belongs to the 10 richest American presidents. The source I used estimates Jackson's assets with $120 million adjusted for inflation. But it is more than the biography, which has certain similarities. I think it's also the way both presidents are perceived in public. In 2016, Donald Trump was a new kind of politician. The world hadn't seen like this before. For many years, American presidents had quite similar lives, careers before becoming president. Donald Trump, however, was different. He did not come from politics, didn't have a political career before, and was often perceived as, let's say, eccentric. Some people hate this, others were enthusiastic about this. Probably because they saw a person who does not mince words and does not have the background, does not behave like all those people who disappointed them for many years. I will not include my personal opinion in this, but I think this was a very strong argument for people who voted for Trump. Do you agree with that? Let me know in the comments, please. In Jackson's case, this is a little bit different, but I think we can also say about him that he was eccentric and a new kind of politician, just in a different way than Donald Trump. And eccentric for sure. Andrew Jackson, for example, was known for fighting in many duels, was more popular than this. Alexander Hamilton, the founding father, for example, died this way. But Jackson did this quite often, once even killed a man in a duel. I think this is something we can call eccentric. In general, I would say that Jackson was someone, let's say you do not want to have as your enemy. And I think we can say something similar about Donald Trump in different ways than Jackson, but you probably also do not want to have Donald Trump as your enemy. That's not a political comment, is it? But what do I mean when I say that Andrew Jackson was a new kind of politician? Andrew Jackson also ended the reign of an established type of politician, namely the Founding Fathers. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison all belonged to the most important Founding Fathers. James Monroe, the 5th American president, is still mainly considered to be a Founding Father, a less important but an acknowledged one. John Quincy Adams, the 6th American president, is rather not considered to be a Founding Father, but as the son of the 2nd American president, John Adams, who was a very important Founding Father, I think we can still say that he belongs to this type of Founding Father politician. Jackson, number 7, however, was something different. He hated established powers, and that's another thing he has in common with Donald Trump, I guess. For sure, in the 90s, for example, Donald Trump had to do a lot with the Clintons, but I think during the 2016 election, Donald Trump had learned to hate established politicians. Now looking at their political careers, we will also find certain similarities. For example, that they both used the power to decide things themselves quite often. Jackson used his veto quite often, Trump used many decrees. By the way, both of them survived an assassination attempt. Jackson was furthermore the first president who was tried to be assassinated, and it's actually said that Jackson finished the assassin off with his walking stick. Back to politics, or better to economy finance, there's also something interesting, namely that both drove their own course. What do I mean? Jackson was the first president and only president in American history to pay off all American debts. Trump, however, tries to move back from this globalization course the presidents before him and Joe Biden had driven. One thing that is of course not a similarity, but may be interesting to know, is that Andrew Jackson was a slave owner. Andrew Jackson owned about 300 slaves. And in comparison to other American presidents, George Washington was against slavery, owned them. Andrew Jackson supported slavery. I didn't study Jackson's ideology deeply, but if you ask me, the motivation was mainly opportunistic. He did not go along with those who called slavery a God-given right, but he also saw the benefits for the South of America. Therefore, Jackson did see enemies in the abolitionists. Is that pronounced correctly? In the end, this kind of caused that Jackson had enemies under both sides, the abolitionists and the slave owners from the South, who strongly supported slavery and called this a God-given right. Of course, I do not mean to say that the intention makes a difference, but I thought that would be interesting to know as well. Going back to the commonalities, that's probably the main point I made this video, is that both reacted very, very angry after an election. In Trump's case, this would be the 2020 election. I think there's no need to explain this any further. In Jackson's case, this was the election of 1824. Jackson became president of the United States in 1828, but he also participated in the election 1824. In 1824, Jackson won the popular vote and even got a majority in the Electoral College. A majority, but no absolute majority, which is needed to win the election. And if no one achieves an absolute majority, the House of Representatives decides the winner of the election. And the House of Representatives did not decide for Jackson, they decided for his opponent John Quincy Adams. Jackson called the election and the things that went along with this corrupt. The actual point was that in this election there were more than 2 candidates, there were about 4, and the candidate with the least votes, Henry Clay, decided to support John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams made Henry Clay his Secretary of State. And Jackson was very angry about this because he firstly had won the popular vote, then the Electoral College, and did not become president. And then he called it a deal between Jackson and Clay, made him call this very corrupt, and Jackson kept criticizing this for the next 4 years. So did Donald Trump. Both of them, Donald Trump and Jackson, built a campaign on this accusation of being treated unfairly. By the way, the Democratic Party was founded in consequence of this election. This would be a difference between Trump and Jackson, namely that Jackson was a Democrat and Trump is a Republican. But we have to say that the Democratic Party had a completely different profile back in those days, and the Republicans didn't even exist. In the end, both candidates, Jackson and Trump, were not willing to accept this and built up a campaign of this accusation of betrayal, of corruption whatsoever. In the end, both Jackson and Trump for the next 4 years led very emotional campaigns. 1828 is considered to be one of the dirtiest elections in American history, and I think 2024 will also not go down in history, the election campaigns, as the most respectful things in history. Decisive is that both candidates won the next election 4 years later, Jackson in 1828, Trump in 2024. Do you have further similarities between Trump and Jackson? Let me know in the comments, please. And if you are interested in some coincidences between Trump and Kennedy, the style of video is a little bit different, but I think in general it is quite similar. Then check out this video here, and I say thank you for watching.